What's up everybody, Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2019 Lexus GS F. Huge thanks to Lexus for providing me with its flare yellow GS F to review for you guys today. So about the GS F, well, it's basically the same as the 2016 model that I reviewed about 3 years ago now in 2016, but one of the main new things here is this flare yellow color. But that's not all that's new. The reason why I wanted to do a new video was because this has this new adaptive variable suspension system, which should help this to handle a lot more differently than the previous GS F, which was 2016. Now this suspension did get improved in 2017, so the 2017s are the first ones to get this, so it is a carryover here for 2019, but since I hadn't covered it, I thought it was worth covering again. And also just another opportunity to drive the GS F. I love the way this thing drives. I also love the way it looks, especially in this flare yellow color. It really pops. It turns lots of heads too, if that's something you're into. But it's a distinctive color. It really sets it off nicely with all the carbon fiber accents you have around the vehicle. Right in the front there, you can see there's a little bit of carbon fiber mixed into that Lexus grille that is now famous. I also love these triple beam LED headlamps that you have. Again, very cool, and that's something they had several years ago, and I think they were ahead of the curve, and now this really has aged nicely so that it still looks very modern and recent. I also love the LFA-inspired front air dam there. That's very cool looking. Coming down to the sides, you have these 19-inch hand-polished forged wheels that are, lighter than standard wheels and are a really nice look. Still the same style as the 2016, but still great nonetheless. I also still love this fender vent here, which is just really gives it this muscular stance in addition to the flared out fenders you get here on the GS F. Going out back there, it still looks great. I love the smoked tail lamps. I still think that the stacked exhaust tips is a cool touch, and the carbon fiber lip there on the deck lid looks great. And it's subtle. It's not quite as in your face as some of the others, but blends in nicely with all the other super sedans in this segment that it competes against. And overall, I think it's still a fantastic look. Whereas for the interior of the Lexus GS F, well, it is still a very cool place to be, but it is a little dated looking at this point. But first, these seats are really fantastic still. Now, they're not as adjustable as most of the competitors. There isn't any adjustable bolstering or anything like that, but they're still very comfortable seats. They do have adjustable lumbar, but the bolstering is just great. I mean, thigh support is awesome, torso support is awesome, and I just love, just the sportier look you have to them too. They're just really, I think, a little bit on the firmer side, but still very comfortable seats. They're also heated and cooled here, and the cooling does a good job of actually getting them cold instead of just ventilating them like some others do. And so, yeah, really great seats. I just, again, wish there was a little bit more customization to them, but still great nonetheless. Next is the steering wheel here in the GS F, which is the same as it has been for the past few years, but it's still a great wheel. It has an awesome 9-3 grip, nice 10-2 notches, and a thicker wheel for sure. I like the blue stitching on it here. And I also appreciate that there's only a few buttons here. So, they still are continuing on with the cruise control being in this little stock, which is something that goes back to, many decades before. But I actually like that because it means you don't have a million buttons on the steering wheel here. One thing that I do wish they would change about this wheel, though, is these paddle shifters, which look like metal, but still are very plasticky feeling. And, 3 years ago, they weren't bad. These days, even Kia has more realistic feeling metal paddle shifters in cars that are half the price. So that's something I wish they would improve or actually upgrade to real metal would be nice too. But that's the only thing I can say is otherwise, it's just a fantastic wheel. Next are the gauges here, which are also still fantastic, but a little dated at this point as well. So I still love the design of them, LFA inspired, and I still love having the central tack there and the different looks that it takes on whenever you're in the Sport and Sport Plus modes. It's all very cool. It even has an active red line, so whenever the engine's warming up, it will give you a lower red line to make sure you don't hurt the engine at all. I still like, the analog speedometer and all the trip information, and also the dedicated F little menu there. You can see torque distribution, you can see a G meter and a couple other things there, and that's all great to have. But these days, in 2019, there's a lot of really sweet looking digital gauge clusters in a lot of the competing vehicles, and this just, again, looks a few years old at this point. Still looks great, still does everything just fine, but doesn't wow you as much as you expect to be wowed in a car that's nearly $90,000, I think. But still great. One thing they did improve here in the past couple of years is the heads-up display is now a color heads-up display, and so now you can see it has a tachometer there. That is an option. I think it's like a $600 option or something for that heads-up display, and it's a nice feature to have. I'm not crazy about heads-up displays though in general, so that's something I could easily do without, but it is nice to have nonetheless. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, this is my main gripe, is that they didn't update the infotainment system. Now, it still is a fantastically huge 12.3-inch display, and Lexus was one of the first to do these massive widescreen displays back in 2016 when I originally reviewed this, and so it was cutting edge back then. These days though, it still is, you know, very nice to have and right in line with what you give a lot of the competition, but it's still, it has the old menus, and even the newer 2019 Lexus models like the ES has a newer menu setup that looks a little more modern. This just looks kind of dated. You know, now the newer one isn't fantastic either, but at least they are starting to come around. They are starting to introduce Apple CarPlay and Android Auto slowly but surely, and they are, you know, having a touchscreen capability available now for a couple of models, just getting started with that kind of stuff. This is still just very ancient, still does not have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, doesn't have that new menu setup, even though it is the same screen size. I don't know why they couldn't just flash the new display on here, but you're still using this little mouse thing, which has been around for a good while now. Most people hate it, and these days, you know, with more and more companies going to touchscreen and stuff, this is you know, just a little more clumsy and just feels, again, dated. That's kind of my general theme with this interior, but it's to be expected because the car is several years old now. So you know, I kind of have to cut it a little bit of a break because I'm just happy that the GS F still exists, but you know, compared to some of the newest competition, this certainly will feel a little bit old. Coming down, you have volume and tune knobs, which is great to have since that's not a given in many of the other vehicles in this segment, and so great to have both of those. They have a really nice metal feel to them too. And then just a few buttons here for climate control, very simple, and I appreciate the lack of buttons. That is one nice thing about this interior. So, you know, I do like how simple it is in here, but like I said, could use some updates and stuff like changing the graphics for the menus and stuff for the infotainment is an easy thing. I'm not sure why they didn't do that type of stuff. Another thing that still boggles my mind is the fit and finish here for this cup holder area. I complained about this 3 years ago, and I thought maybe they would change it or improve it, but instead you still have this gap here. It just doesn't fit right, and that's something that they all do, and it kind of mars the look of this, even though it's nice carbon fiber, very flashy. But you know, there are still some other things, like you still have some of the nicest padding on a center transmission tunnel area that I've seen still to date. It's just so pillowy soft that rests your knee on there, which is great. But anyway, other things here. Moving on to storage space in the GS F, it is still pretty good and competitive with most of the others out there these days. You have a map pocket here, which does seem to have a tiny bit of a bottle holder, but doesn't seem super, you know, accommodating, but nice to have that big pocket nonetheless. And then coming over to the center here, you do have two cup holders, which are a pretty good size, and then you have the center armrest, which is covered in Alcantara, much like a few of the other parts of the interior here, and it is pretty soft and feels nice to rest your elbow on. And then you slide that back and then lift it up, and you will see first off this little removable tray, and then also this deeper area down here, which is a good amount of space. It's about the same as what you get in all the competing vehicles, so totally good there. And you also see two USB jacks, an auxiliary jack, and a normal power outlet in there as well, so good to have all of that. And so storage space wise, it is right in line with most of the competitors. Now, it doesn't have some of the newest features like a wireless charging pad or things like that you do get in some of those newer competing vehicles, but still, you know, on par with most out there, and so overall still pretty good as far as that goes. Backseat space in the GS F is really nice, so you know, it's just more of those cool looking seats there, and it's a very accommodating back seat too. I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself. I have about 3 to 4 inches of legroom to spare, so probably not best in class or anything, but totally sufficient for a vehicle of this class. And you still have a good amount of headroom as well too, so you know, I don't think anyone's going to really complain sitting back there. They'll also find when they look forward dedicated air vents as well as a power outlet there. There's also a pocket in the door with a kind of bottle holder there, and then you fold down the center armrest and you will see just a nice armrest there and two little cubbies, and then in the front of it there is where you will find your two cup holders for the back seat area there. And so you know, not feature packed, they're not heated or anything. You don't have any kind of executive package or anything there for the back seat, but we are still in the smaller GS GS, so totally fine. You can always go up to the LS if you want, you know, something like that that's a little more luxurious back there. And so overall, pretty good back seat. The trunk space of the GSF is still fantastic and still probably one of the best in the class, if not the best, just basically because it has such a wide trunk opening. It is so wide and just really easy to load in things there. And it's also just a nice wide and long trunk. It's a really good sized trunk, and even beneath the floor you'll see another little additional bin. It's not super deep, but you can fit some small little items in there as well if you'd like. And so overall, still a fantastic amount of trunk space in the GSF too. All right, so let's start up and go for a drive. The GSF has this nice Lexus key. It is in this leather pouch, which you can get as an optional extra. But, you know, just basic plastic buttons, not really a nice key, although you do have a little bit of a metal look there on the corner of it. But otherwise, you know, not remarkable. But in the leather pouch, it is very nice and gives a little bit more of an expensive feel. But anyway, it's keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start, of course. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button. It roars to life. All right, so setting off in the 2019 Lexus GS F. So first thing I think I noticed is the fantastic visibility here. It is way better than a lot of the German competitors, which love to have really thick A-pillars. This one's nice and thin. The mirror is off on the door, not connected to the A-pillar, so you have fantastic visibility forward. Hood drops down nicely. Dashboard isn't too high, so very easy to see forward. Nice large side windows, and view out of the back is also great with a nice large window in typical sedan fashion. Other things that you notice right off the bat in the GSF is the razor sharp throttle response. So, I mean, you have a naturally aspirated engine, and just in the F models, everything is really fine-tuned, especially so that it's so communicative, and it's so eager to respond to your inputs. Everything in this vehicle is just set up to be a driver's car. It is so dialed in. It actually kind of reminds me of the Alfa Romeo Giulia. Now, it's not quite as divine as that with all the inputs being so precise, but it is fairly close, and that just was one of the things that I was reminded of driving this, because previously I had not driven an Alfa before the last GSF review, and that is one thing that I'm noticing, is that everything is really nicely dialed in. I mean, steering has a really nice weight to it as well, and just, you know, feels pretty good. You know, you get a decent amount of feel through it, a little bit more I think than you get with some of the newer competitors as well. Brakes also have a really nice bite to them. They're massive Brembo brakes here. 6 piston in the front, 4 piston in the rear, and 15-inch rotors up front. I think it's like 13.6 in the back. But big brakes, both in the front and for the rear. Those are still pretty big brakes, which means this would be pretty good and stout for track driving and things like that if you wanted. But that means that you can really stop with authority in this thing. I mean, it's not too jumpy with the brake pedal. That is one thing that is set up much better than like the Alphas, for example, with their very touchy and hard to modulate brake pedals. This is very easy to modulate, but it is, you can tell there's a little bit of extra grab there. You're not driving a standard GS, which is cool. It's just a really nice, comfortable cruiser. So, you know, you do have this nice little burble in the background there, but it's not overpowering, it's not super loud. Would be nice to have some type of adaptive active exhaust or something like that, but unfortunately you just have one mode for the exhaust and that's it, old school style. But still, it's just a really nice thing to cruise around in, and especially now, so we have this adaptive variable suspension system now that they actually added in 2017, and it is supposed to, you have a few different settings to it to kind of dial it in for better, I guess, comfort and also better handling. And so on a main road here, you know, it's been a few years since I drove a GSF, but it is very comfortable and smooth, and I'm actually impressed with, you know, I'm feeling things through the steering wheel, but I'm not feeling anything through the seat. And then of course, if you were to go up into the Sport Plus mode, then it does firmer damper setting then. Sport mode, the regular Sport mode only improves the transmission and makes that a little bit more excitable, but you have to go up to the Sport Plus mode in order to get the heavier steering weight and the quicker steering ratio, and also have that firmer suspension set up. Another thing though, while I'm maneuvering around here in a little bit of a tight space, is that, you know, another thing that's lagging behind is the tech here in the GSF. Now, they did improve some of the tech, so you do have like a full speed adaptive cruise control now. I think that was a new addition for 2018. Previously, it only worked above 30 miles an hour. Now the adaptive cruise works all the way down to a stop, which is a nice improvement. And you do also have lane keep assist now, which is a new thing I think for 2018 they rolled out. But you still just have a basic backup camera. There isn't any kind of cool 360 cameras or enhanced stuff like you get again with some of the newer competing vehicles, but that's okay, because the performance in this thing does not disappoint. So we'll go ahead and put it up into the Sport Plus mode here, and let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. Maybe here we go. Oh, and it screams. It sounds so good. I love the induction note. It's like all intake growl from that engine. Not a ton of exhaust note, but that's okay because it just really sounds good. I love hearing the engine. That's something you don't get a whole lot these days because a lot of that is so muffled, and so they just amp up the exhaust volume, which is fine, but I love just hearing, oh, it's a mighty sound. And then you have these fantastic brakes that really clamp down quickly and slow you down just as fast as you speed up. So anyway, the GS F here still runs a gloriously naturally aspirated 5-liter V8 engine. It's both port and direct injection too, so it should be a very reliable engine in the long term as well. But anyway, the engine has 467 horsepower, 389 pound-feet of torque, and it'll do 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds, which is good performance. You know, it has a standard 8-speed automatic transmission here, which does have pretty good performance, but does make you wait a little longer than I would like for a downshift sometimes. Now you do have a little bit of a button at the bottom of the throttle pedal, and it will automatically go full tilt at that point if you do switch over to that. But for half throttle and stuff, I still wish it would downshift a little bit faster, but it still does feel very good. But we'll go ahead and put it into the manual mode and try some manual shifts here. Not at full throttle, but just... All right, so we got a little bit of gravel there, so the back end wanted to kick around a little bit, but it's pretty responsive. So the tach will show you a gear change before you actually feel the gear change, but if you're paying attention to the feeling of it, you will notice that it still isn't quite as quick as all the newest stuff. You know, if competitors running either dual clutches or ZF8 speeds, this is just a little bit behind all of those, and so that again is where the GS F shows its age. But if you leave it in automatic mode and you're just doing full throttle pulls, or you have it in that Sport Plus mode, I don't think you're going to be too disappointed. I think it is still going to give you basically quick enough performance that it shouldn't annoy you or anything like that. But we're coming up to some corners here, so I'm going to put the torque vectoring differential here into its slalom mode, which is optimized for tighter corners and gives you really quick turn and eager, helps with the torque vectoring, which is a real torque vectoring system, by the way. It uses engine power instead of using brakes to really kind of give you quicker turn in, and it is very impressive. So in addition to slalom, there's also the track mode, and so that's for higher speed corners and things like that. Whenever you want high speed stability, that's what that is for. But we're on some fairly low speed roads, not doing too much speed here, so I think the slalom mode is perfect, and it just is so eager, and it is, like I said, it really reminds me of the Giulia. Not quite as amazing, steering isn't still quite as quick as that or anything, but it just really wants to dart in, and that combined with just the razor sharp throttle response, the very responsive brakes, everything is just so tuned in to every little twitch of your wrist, and just every little input you give it, it just amplifies that and just takes off running with all those little inputs. And so it really just is, it's so rewarding from a driver's standpoint. I think that's kind of, they wanted to have a really balanced vehicle with this, and it really pays off in that pursuit. It's not going to win a drag race against all of its competitors, and it's not going to be the most luxurious by far or anything like that. But whenever it comes to just a back road, it's just lighter than, basically all the competitors, I think. This only weighs 4,023 pounds versus, it's very common to see 4,500 pound weight numbers thrown around for a lot of the competitors and stuff, and many of them going to all-wheel drive and everything now. That just adds weight. This being rear-wheel drive only still, a naturally aspirated V8, no turbos to have over the front end, no all-wheel drive system, no over-complicated interior. It's just, it gives you a very lean experience, and it's really, really, really rewarding. And even whenever you compare it to smaller stuff, like, instead of comparing this to an M5, compare it to an M3, I still like the way this handles even better than an M3, because that has not necessarily harsh ride. This has still a fairly supple ride, even despite the fact that, you have really good handling. It's very quick to dart in. It feels lighter than an M3 even to me, and just really, really feels good. I love And then whenever you have that soundtrack to listen to, it only sweetens the deal here with the GS F. Oh man, it is so punchy. This engine is just so willing. You know, it's got a red line, by the way, of 7,300 RPMs. So I mean, fairly high these days, and just means that it really just loves to sing in those upper RPMs. Just again, just all adds to the experience. It's not, like I said, going to, you know, by the numbers, it's not impressive, but the experience is certainly impressive. Do another acceleration here just for kicks. I can feel the back end wanting to dance around a little bit too, because we have pretty good grip, but it's not, again, as meaty as many of the competing vehicles. So it really wants, in Sport Plus mode here, it really hangs on to those higher RPMs as long as possible here. But anyway, the tires, getting back to those, they are Michelin Pilot Super Sport tires, so the older Super Sports, still fantastic tires. That's just, they kept those on because that's what was used to develop this vehicle. That was developed around those tires, so you're still using those. They're 255 wide in the front, 275s in the rear, and so again, not as wide as a lot of the, you know, wider stuff you see there these days in other vehicles, but it does enough. I mean, I haven't had any super tail-happy antics, and even if I did have that, I would welcome that. And it still has plenty of grip up front that I'm never wanting for more grip. So to me, totally sufficient tire setup. You don't need to have super expensive, super wide tires if, you know, it's just overkill. I think, especially as a daily driver, this is going to be fantastic as is. And it's really, you know, even the Sport Plus mode here, you know, getting back to the one main change, that adaptive variable suspension. I have noticed that it filters out a little bit. It's mostly like a lot of the magnetic ride systems and other things like that, which are a little fancier, I think, than this system is. But, you know, they all just kind of act as a filter. They're not game-changing, in my opinion. You know, it does make it feel a little bit smoother whenever you're out of the Sport Plus mode. But even in normal mode, you know, it still isn't going to be buttery smooth. It still is a little bit of a sportier suspension setup here, obviously for the F version. And then in Sport Plus mode, it's firm, but we're not talking race car stiff or anything. So, you know, it's not a massive difference, honestly. But you know, that's okay. I think it is nice that it has that additional adjustability, but I personally, you know, it doesn't seem like a wild difference over the 2016 GS F that I drove without it. So if you're debating, you know, like buying one of these used, and you're like, well, you know, you get that suspension if you go for a 2017 or newer, you know, I don't think you're missing out on a ton if you just went for a 2016 or something like that. But it is, you know, nice. If you do sit in traffic, having the full speed cruise control is a huge thing. That was introduced again in 2018. Definitely worth, you know, getting a newer one if you want to have that. So anyway, I'm going to be driving this vehicle for a whole week though, thanks to Lexus here. So I'm going to drive around all week. Then I'll come back and give you guys my final thoughts on everything, my real world fuel economy over the course of the week, and anything else that I notice while I'm driving it here. But should be a fun week. Alright, so I've been driving the GS F here for a week now, and I mean, it's a lot of fun. It's great, you know, having the four doors too. You can take all your friends for a ride, and it's a very, very impressive performance still. Yes, it is way less power than all of its competitors, but that's okay, because it still is just really quick enough. I think, you know, that's really the mantra of this car. I think is it's enough for a super sedan. It's not overkill like many of the others, which is fun. I'm all for overkill, but this is still just as much fun to me in many, many ways. Now, obviously, you know, if you're flooring it, it's not going to be quite as extreme, but other than that, it's fantastic. And so a few things here during my week of driving. I put 176 miles on it in my week here, and my average fuel economy here was 15.8 mpg, which is right in line with the estimates. It's rated at 16 in the city, 24 on the highway, and 19 combined. I did do a little bit of highway driving, but not a whole lot, so to basically be getting that city number is expected. Now, just because that's also the estimate doesn't make it any less okay that we're getting 16 mpg in a sedan like this. I mean, it is definitely you know, a gas guzzler, but that's part of the performance, you know, trade-off here is, especially having a naturally aspirated V8, you know, it doesn't really make up much mileage on the highway and stuff like some of the turbo competition might, but I still love the way this engine sounds, and that's something you don't get with the turbo engines and all the other vehicles out there these days. And so, you know, obviously if you can afford a vehicle that's $89,000 like this one is, you know, filling up pretty frequently shouldn't be too big of an issue for you either. So probably a non-issue there for people who actually buy these. Speaking of that price tag there though, you know, $89,000 and change for this one as tested. Now these start in the lower 80s, you know, mid 80, I think 84 is the base price here. This one has a few optional extras. So it has this 17 speaker, I think it's 835 watt Mark Levinson stereo, which sounds very good. The vocals are very crisp and clear. The bass is also pretty clear, not the best bass as far as, you know, cleanness goes, but does sound very good still, and just a very powerful system. I really enjoy that. It's just unfortunate that it's tied up with this infotainment system, which still is just way harder than all the other new touchscreen stuff these days. It's not as easy to use, and living with this system, I think I would kind of get annoyed with it. The fact that, again, it doesn't have any smartphone integration whatsoever. If you're into tech, that would probably be a deal breaker, especially considering the faster competition does, most of them do offer, you know, some type of smartphone integration as well. So that is just, you know, one of the things of this vehicle being old. And I would say, well, hopefully the next gen version will improve on those things. But, you know, with the ES kind of now going up into the GS's territory, you know, the future of the GS is uncertain, and we don't really know what to expect. There might be a new GS coming, but it is a little bit of a crowded space now for Lexus. I'm kind of approaching this, you know, review in this car as I'm happy this car exists still. And so yes, it's not perfect, and some of the newer competition does do most of the things better, but you know, it's a dying breed here of a naturally aspirated V8, you know, rear-wheel drive sports sedan like this, since most of them are going all-wheel drive these days as well, and you're getting heavier because of it. Having this be lighter rear-wheel drive, I think this is really, it's poised to be a future classic, I think. At least there's a good chance it could be. This is going to stand out in 15 years or 20 years whenever everything else from this time period is going to be, you know, a basket case as far as all, you know, the turbo setups and the higher horsepower and all the wizardry going on with the all-wheel drive system being all electronic and everything. I think this is going to have a simplicity that will help it to age better than some of those. And I think, again, because Lexus has very strong reliability, it's a port and direct injected engine, you have strong resale value, you know, this is going to hold up. So there's not going to be a whole lot that needs done to these in 15 years versus many of the competitors. And so, you know, I know that doesn't help sell them currently, but I think this will be a vehicle, especially these more rare ones and these, you know, rare colors. And there's also the 10th anniversary F version that's also going to be, you know, pretty collectible, I'm sure, because they're only making, I think, 100 of those. You know, at the price tag it's at, again, $89,000, it is tough to justify today, especially a few years now, since it's, you know, been hasn't really aged great with a lot of the tech and stuff. I mean, you still do have full speed adaptive cruise control, which is great, but, you know, you look at some of the competitors, and I mean, there's several, and I mean, like the CTSV is also going away, and then we're gonna have a slower one replacing it. So, you know, but you have that, you can get one of those for you know, around this price tag as well, new. And so, you know, you have stuff like that which is way faster, has a touchscreen infotainment system with, you know, the smartphone integration, all that kind of stuff. And then even like one of the newest ones, it isn't even a full-on performance version, because the BMW M5, those start well over $100,000, and then with options you're well into the, you know, 120s and stuff with many of those. But the M550i xDrive, now again, it's heavier, you have all-wheel drive, but it is still a very soft ride, but it is still so fast. And they just got a power upgrade here for the 2020 models coming as well. And so those are gonna have even more power. You're gonna have basically M5, previous gen M5 performance out of the M550i. And so that with the all-wheel drive and its nicer interior, it also has Apple CarPlay integration, no Android Auto. You know, that's gonna be something that you can get one of those very nicely loaded up for low 80s and actually undercut this and have a faster car that, you know, you will be able to have the all-wheel drive, so you have a little bit more all-season capability if that's important. You just, again, you don't have the reliability of Lexus, you don't have that quality to it, but it is still, of course, a very nice interior, and it's brand new, so it's, you know, got nicer materials on the inside here, the better tech, a lot more features, you can get massage, all that type of stuff. And so I think actually the M550i is the strongest competitor to this, I think, currently, because we're kind of in a limbo where a lot of the stuff like the CTSV is going away, and the stuff replacing it is way more expensive, and the super sedans that used to be had for $90,000 are now $130,000 cars. You're talking about, you know, E63s and stuff like that. So that's kind of, you know, where it sits as far as the competitors. But like I said, I think Yeah, it's a very unique positioning with this one, having less power, but having that longer reliability, the stronger resale values, those types of things I think are going to always be the Lexus strong suit. And like I said, I'm just glad that this car is still around because it is fantastic. So anyway, huge thanks to Lexus for providing me with the GSF here to review for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts on the GSF in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.